Biden's really done it this time, guys. So we've talked before about the collapse of the Baltimore Bridge, right? Well, stick around because according to the critics, President Joe Biden has made it all about himself again. Fox News host Sean Hannity and some other right-wing media news outlets pointed out Biden's latest slip-up when it comes to the Francis Scott Key Bridge. You see, Biden claimed he had traveled over the collapsed Baltimore Bridge many times before by both car and by train. Only one problem, guys. The structure did not have any railway lines. The official X account on a Donald Trump campaign posted a clip of Biden's speech calling the president confused again. Biden also said that he will go to Baltimore next week. Now, at the time of this video, 4 people are still missing, presumably dead and in the water, as the president made his promise to follow the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg on his visit to the site. Another major consideration for officials is that the ship Dali was carrying at least 56 containers of hazardous materials, some of which fell into the water following the crash. The command announced that it had paused dive operations and vehicle recovery due to hazardous conditions in the river from the wreckage. And in the latest development, details from the moments leading up to the devastating Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse were discovered in the cargo ship's black box voyage data recorder as the pilot tried to alert authorities to the oncoming disaster. Biden hastily promised to pay for the bridge repair, something that's got both conservatives and liberals criticizing the president of. Representative Dan Meuser said that President Biden's promise that the federal government would fund the repair of the bridge was outrageous and asserted that the federal government can't just take the east route. His suggestion: seek the necessary funds to rebuild the bridge from the government of Singapore, where the cargo ship Dali is registered. Jamal Simmons, a Democratic strategist and Vice President Harris's former communications director, pointed out the fact that the bridge didn't just collapse. There was no earthquake. The bridge was knocked down, apparently, by a private ship that lost control. Shouldn't they be at least partly responsible for fixing it? Needless to say, the collapse has thrown East Coast shipping into chaos, shutting down the port of Baltimore and severing Interstate 695. Maryland state data indicated that 850,000 car and truck imports have rotated through the area, and some 30,000 vehicles cross the bridge daily. The port also supports about 15,000 jobs. It's unclear how much a new bridge would cost or how long it would take to build. Federal officials estimated it could cost as much as $2 billion. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen also tried walking back Biden's comments. She said that there are insurance payments in part to cover this. So the question is, why is Biden suddenly so concerned about the Baltimore Bridge collapse? Is this another part of his political agenda for November? Let's find out in today's video. Stay right there, guys. So here's Fox News host Sean Hannity talking about how Biden made the Baltimore Bridge collapse all about himself. Check this out.
But we start with Joe Biden himself. Now, before the president and vice president departed on separate planes for an event in North Carolina, well, Joe did try to offer some brief remarks on the tragic bridge collapse that took place in Baltimore. Here is the sad and pathetic part. As per usual, Biden made it all about himself, and yet another tall tale about his own personal connection to that bridge, which didn't exist. We'll tell you in a minute.
At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which I've been over many times commuting from the state of Delaware, either on a train or by car. Been in Baltimore Harbor many times.
All right, big problem. You see, there's no railroad on the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and there would be no reason for Joe Biden to cross it on his way to D.C. But like every other national tragedy, whatever this issue is, Joe Biden always seems to find a way to make it all about himself.
Critics say 100% Biden is concerned about infrastructure. Unfortunately, the infrastructure that Biden prioritizes is in Ukraine. People are calling for President Biden to stop trying to support every country out there that has a problem and spend our own taxes on our own country. The same goes with the Francis Scott Key Bridge. In an address to the country after the destruction of the iconic bridge, named after the writer of the U.S. national anthem, mind you, the U.S. president promised to provide federal funds to rebuild it and protect the livelihoods of workers at the port of Baltimore. But as Representative Dan Meuser points out, should we really be asking Singapore to pay for the repair, since the ship was on its way to Singapore when it happened? But really, the major criticism against Biden here is how he's taken this tragedy and talking all about train journeys over the collapsed Baltimore Bridge that never even had train tracks on it. I mean, there's got to be something wrong with that picture, right? He said he was familiar with the bridge, having used it to travel from his home state of Delaware to Washington. He said he's been over the bridge many times, commuting from the state of Delaware by train or by car. Now, they looked it up. The bridge did not not have any railway lines and has been exclusively used as a roadway since it was built in the early 1970s. Biden has spoken extensively about his use of the Amtrak train to travel between his home and Washington while serving as a senator between 1973 and 2009. The Amtrak line does travel through Baltimore, but skirts around the city center rather than using the bridge to cross the river. It does not travel across the harbor. The official X account of the Donald Trump campaign posted the clip of Biden's speech, calling the president confused again. Heck, maybe he's just straight up lying. Then they reiterate there are no train tracks on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. So what do you guys think? Is Biden really being sincere here? Drop a quick comment, yes or no, down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to give this video a like and that subscribe button a tap as well. We always appreciate you guys here, and we love delivering the news that matters most to you. So don't miss it, and make sure your notification bell's turned on. Okay, so the cargo ship black box, its voyage data recorder. It was discovered recently, and it revealed the intense moments leading up to Baltimore Bridge's collapse. The timeline provided by federal officials provides the most detailed account yet of the moments leading up to the disaster, and will be the focus for investigators as they try to understand what caused the tragedy and how it could be prevented. So let's look. They said that several alarms were heard on the recording just before 1:25 a.m., followed by about a minute later of steering commands and rudder orders. At 1:26 a.m., the pilot on duty made a radio call for assistance to tugboats in the area, and 45 seconds later ordered the port anchor dropped. At 1:27 a.m., the pilot said on the radio that the Dali had lost power and was nearing the bridge. Now, around that same time, the officer on duty of the Maryland Transportation Authority told officers who were at both ends of the bridge for the road repairs to close traffic, which likely saved tons of lives. At 1:29 a.m., as the powerless Dali was drifting at 8 miles per hour, the VDR recorded sounds consistent with the collision of the bridge. 6 seconds later, the pilot reported to the Coast Guard that the bridge was down. The National Transportation Safety Board has not yet determined the exact cause for why the Dali struck one of the bridge's main support columns. Preliminary reports suggest that the ship may have lost power and was unable to steer clear out of the way of the bridge. After hearing this, the people commented how this sounds like an attack funded by a terrorist group. And many don't know, but the bridge was named after the man that created the American national anthem. Talk about symbolic. Biden said that he will go to Baltimore in the coming days. He's already granted $60 million in federal funding to Maryland for the initial cleanup, but reopening a new bridge will probably take several years, even if the port itself can be cleared up for shipping in the next few weeks. Some argue that this information and Joe Biden and Obama's wanting to pay for the bridge makes the ordeal suspicious. Some say that our governing body has been way too busy laundering money through pet pork fat projects rather than investing in our country. Biden claimed that he expected congressional support for the reconstruction project. He said that it's his intention that the federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge, and he expects the Congress to support his effort. But Republican lawmaker Dan Meuser from Pennsylvania said Biden's promise was outrageous and asserted that the federal government can't just take the east route, meaning the whole ship trading route that goes through the bridge. This is ridiculous considering that we're not really even sure what the repairs and restoration will cost. Federal officials estimate that it could cost as much as $2 billion. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg claimed the federal government has about $950 million in funds authorized for emergency use. The rest will need to be approved by Congress. Meuser said that the president's first reaction, frankly the only reaction, tends to be to spend. Instead, Meuser suggested that the U.S. try to seek the necessary funds to rebuild the bridge from the government of Singapore, where the cargo ship Dali is registered. But what do you guys think? Other conservative spending hawks who are already up in arms about Congress's recent approval of a massive 2024 spending package, they say Washington just simply can't afford to pile more money onto national debt. Instead, they argue that Key Bridge is a regional matter to be tracked by regional governments. Representative Ralph Norman said that the very thought of having the federal government pay for the Baltimore Bridge is totally absurd, that this exemplifies the old slogan, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Republicans are not only critics, but some liberals are also questioning Biden's proposal. They say that the blame for the tragedy lies, at least in part, with the owner of the cargo vessel. Therefore, they should bear some portion of the repair costs. Jamal Simmons, a Democratic strategist and Vice President Kamala Harris's former communications director, said that the bridge just didn't collapse. There was no earthquake. The bridge was knocked down by a private ship that lost control. Shouldn't they be at least partly responsible for fixing it? Transportation Secretary Janet Yellen also tried to walk back President Biden's all expenses paid promise. She said instead that money from the bipartisan infrastructure law could potentially be helpful, that her expectation expectation would be that ultimately there will be insurance payments in part to cover this. Looking at the wide array of reactions that it stirred across the political spectrum, it's very clear this story taps into broader debates about infrastructure, responsibility, and how we prioritize our resources as a nation. What can I say, guys, except that this is more important than ever to be paying attention to what's really happening to our country as we lead up to what could possibly be the most important election of our history. So yeah, a huge thanks to everybody who tuned in today. If you found value in our analysis today, do me a solid one by hitting the like button, subscribe to our channel, and smash that notification bell so that you never miss out on the latest content. Your support means the world to me, and it totally helps out our channel to be able to keep bringing you guys the insights that you really care about. And hey, sharing is caring, so if you think someone in the world will be interested in this topic today, make sure to share this video. Feel free to share it on Facebook or Twitter. Till then, I'll see you on the next one.